Josh Hoover will be a Heisman finalist in 2025 if he can do these three things.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Thanks for making the show your first listen. We're brought to you today by Gametime. Remember, on the Gametime app, use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first ticket purchase. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 years. Josh Hoover is coming off a really incredible season when you look at it from a stats perspective. Second half of the year, they put together some wins as well. Josh can be a Heisman finalist this next year if he can do these three things. I'm going to get to talk about hoops later on in the show. Rough night for the men's and women's basketball. TCU adding another defensive lineman for 2026. Andy Avalos continues to make the defensive line a priority, but we start today with this. Josh Hoover last season, the numbers, 3,949 yards, 27 touchdowns, 11 picks, 66% completion percentage, 9-4 as a starter when you include the bowl game. It didn't look great in the first half of the season, 3-3, but they closed the season strongly. And it made me think, he had a really prolific year. How did it compare to this year's Heisman finalists? And Travis Hunter, I left him out of it, which you might say that's dumb because he's a Heisman winner. Okay, but the reason is Travis, in my mind, is a once-in-a-generation type of player. I mean, we haven't seen anybody like him in college football since Charles Woodson, right? He was fantastic, and he was doing it on both sides of the ball. That's not what Josh is going to do. So I really looked at the quarterbacks who were Heisman finalists this year. Of course, Ashton Jeanty also had an incredible season at Boise State, but again, different position group, right? So the QBs that were there in New York, Cam Ward, 4,313 yards, 37 touchdowns, 7 picks. Dylan Gabriel, 3,857 yards, 30 touchdowns, 6 picks. And both these guys, because Josh is, I mean, he's a pocket passer. Both Gabriel and Cam Ward, they're more mobile than Josh Hoover was, but they weren't rushing for 500, 600 yards. These were players that ran the ball for, in Ward's case, almost 250, Gabriel's case, about 150. Now, the obvious elephant in the room here is these guys were on teams that were well followed because they were winning games. But if Josh Hoover can do these three things, because the numbers themselves, yeah, he had more turnovers than those two guys. He didn't have as many touchdowns. But from a yardage standpoint, I mean, he's right there. The three things he has to do. Number one, I think he has to throw for 4,000 yards this upcoming season. Now, I've long mentioned that TCU needs to get better in the run game. So is this counterintuitive? No, it's not, because it's possible to do both. I mean, you look at Miami's splits last year. Cam Ward had an incredible season. That being said, they still ran for over 2,000 yards as a team. They had a 1,000-yard rusher, two things that TCU could not do last year. So there was some balance there, right? It doesn't have to be one or the other. I think there's a world where Josh Hoover can throw for 4,000 yards, and you're not talking about an offense that is just solely predicated on his arm. Now, I don't think they're going to have as good of a running attack as Miami did or as Oregon did. But if you can find more balance, that's going to benefit your team in general. But Josh Hoover, I mean, like he can get to that number. He basically did it this year. So I don't think that's an unattainable goal, right? He can make that happen. And if they're doing that, if they're throwing for 4,000 yards and also running the ball fairly effectively, we're talking about an elite offense. I don't think that's crazy to think about. Like, Sonny Dykes is an offensive mind as a head coach. Kendall Briles was brought in here to put together a really prolific offense. That's their job. They're always going to be a team. I think there's a lot to be excited about with the TCU defense this year. But this is always going to be a team where their identity is we're going to score. That's been Sonny's entire career. So if that's the case, it shouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that you have an elite offense that has a little bit of balance to it, but it's led by your quarterback, and he's throwing for crazy numbers. Secondly, more touchdowns, less picks. I'm a genius. Listen to this. Why doesn't Sonny just get in there and say, hey, let's run the touchdown play? But in all seriousness, 27 touchdowns, that's a good number. You need to be knocking on the door of 40. At 40 or right there around it. And in the second half of the season, Josh really protected the ball well. I mean, he did a good job. Once we got past that Texas Tech game, he did a much better job of maximizing possessions, not giving the defense short fields, not putting his defense in rough situations. So it's possible. Now, throughout the first 2 years of his career, this has been a bugaboo for him. He forces the issue. He forces the ball in there. He throws picks. I do think a lot of that has to do with when they get behind in ball games, I feel like Josh just tries to do too much. Now, it's insane to think you're going to be ahead in every game. But the Tech game is a good example. They got off to a hot start. Things fall apart on them. Suddenly they find themselves down by a couple scores, and you're watching Josh try to get everything back in one play and just making ill-advised throws and bad decisions. And around that time, a lot of you hit me up and you're like, what are you seeing here? Because I've been pretty positive about Josh that entire year. What are you seeing here? Well, he bounced back. They won that game, and then through the rest of the season, he played really well. Okay? So find a way to get in the end zone at a bigger rate. And also cut down those turnovers. Don't fumble the ball, which he has a tendency to do that too. Don't throw picks. Keep it clean for the most part. And then finally, and really most importantly, you got to win, okay? Like if you're going to do this, you have to win. The odds right now for the 2025 Heisman Trophy, Garrett Nussmeier at LSU, who once again, I mean, the numbers not that far off from what Josh Hoover was doing. A little over 400 or a little over 4,000 yards passing. He was pretty similar in the turnover department, but threw for more touchdowns. Arch Manning, which a lot of hype there for obvious reasons. Drew Aller, Cade Klubnik, Jeremiah Smith, the wide receiver at Ohio State. What do all these guys have in common besides the fact that they're really good players? Well, they're all on teams that are expected to win big. They're at blue blood programs that we think are going to be in playoff contention. If TCU is 8-4, Josh could throw for 5,000 yards, and he still might not get to New York. That's an exaggeration, but you understand my point. And I know, I mean, Travis Hunter, Big 12 guy, but that was at Colorado. Colorado commanded the spotlight. That's event television every time Deion takes the field. In the Alamo Bowl game, when they played BYU throttled them. Go back and look. You're not going to because you're not going to scroll through 17 million Instagram posts or Twitter posts. Look at ESPN College Football, that account. Look at the SportsCenter account. Look at the ESPN, the big ESPN account. The highlights that they showed from that game, Shadur Sanders, Travis Hunter. BYU won that game handily. They handled their business at Colorado. There were not a lot of BYU highlights on social media that night. Okay? TCU's not in that spot. If TCU's going to send somebody to New York, part of it is you got to win. You need to be in playoff contention. You need to be playing for a Big 12 title. Max Duggan in the playoffs. Played for Big 12 championship. Had signature moments. What's that signature moment going to be? It has to be in a big game. And you look through the list of past Heisman winners. I mean, this past year, Travis Hunter, a little bit of a different situation. But Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, Devontae Smith, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Marcus Mariota. These are all guys that were playing for national titles or in the mix for them. So That's the biggest aspect of this. He's going to have to do something to command attention from the national media. The only way he's going to command attention from the national media is to win at a high level. But if he does that, if the team does that, not he, it's not just a one-person thing. If TCU does that, then if he puts up similar numbers to what he did this year, I don't think it's insane to think that he'll be there on the list. At least somebody that should be considered as getting some votes. And some of you probably think I'm crazy, and that's fine. You can think that. But I'm telling you, when I was just looking at the facts, I'm like, hey, he had a crazy season. You're going into basically year 3 as a starter. Growth, development, all those things matter. All those things are going to make a big difference. Josh Hoover could be there, but the biggest aspect of it for the entire team, you got to win. You got to win. You got to win big games. When we come back, another defensive lineman for the 2026 class. TCU is telling you what they value in this recruiting class. We'll talk about it next year on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Thankful for one of our new sponsors, TalkSpace. Therapy is a game changer, guys. It can help manage stress, improve sleep. You can communicate more effectively, but find the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. I recently started therapy about 6 months ago. I put it off for years because I was always like, well, how am I going to pay for it? What's the insurance, copay going to be? I don't have time for this. I got 4 kids. All the excuses that you can list. Well, give TalkSpace a try because they make it convenient for you. They're the leading virtual therapy provider. They make getting the help you need accessible and affordable. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with TalkSpace when you go to TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter the promo code SPAC80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter promo code SPAC80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege. $80 off your first month. That's a fantastic deal. Give TalkSpace a try. Do it today. Another defensive line commit for the TCU Horned Frogs, and this time it is Maddox Flint out of Austin Westlake, one of the premier high school football programs in the state of Texas. Westlake coming off a state title this past year, and Maddox is just a dude who has produced in his career there. As a sophomore, he was the 26-6A district defensive lineman of the year. He had 56 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks. He followed that up with a big junior season where he was the MVP of that district. 65 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. He has a really good frame. He is currently 6'2", 265 pounds. This is an interior defensive lineman. A lot of these guys that TCU has picked up in the past couple cycles, we talk about position flex. Could they be a stand-up edge? Could they be a hand-in-the-ground defensive end? I think it's pretty clear Maddox Flint is a dude who could be put over your center, over your guard, but he's going to live in the interior of this defensive line. And when you watch the tape, this dude's really strong. I mean, he gets off the ball well. He moves well, but he is punching offensive linemen in the chest and driving them back. There's multiple clips where they have him over the center, like head up in a zero technique or maybe shaded over a little bit. And center snaps the ball, and as soon as he does, Maddox is all over him, and he's driving him back. Not just reestablishing the line of scrimmage, like creating a stalemate at the line of scrimmage and then hopefully getting off that block and making a tackle. I'm talking about blowing a play up by driving that center off the ball and pushing him back into the play. He also has a great effort and motor. There are multiple plays on his huddle highlight film, which you don't usually see plays from defensive linemen where the ball's getting 10, 15, even 30, 40 yards down the field. And in all honesty, if your defensive tackle is making tackles well beyond the line of scrimmage on a consistent basis, that's not good news. But when you watch it, I understand why they're highlighting it or why he decided to highlight it. Because there are multiple plays where somebody breaks off a big gain and he goes from the line of scrimmage and chases somebody down, like chases a skill guy down 20, 30 yards down the field, which that's super rare for someone that size and that position. He runs a 4.840, a 4.840 according to his huddle profile, which is really fast for a dude who's sitting there at 265. As everything else is or goes with defensive lineman recruit and just guys in the trenches in general. This is another dude that I think is going to take a little bit of time to, add to that frame. But I love this pickup. I mean, I really like that they have emphasized the last few seasons. And Maddox currently not ranked. I think that's just simply because they're a little bit behind in the recruiting rankings on the 2026 cycle. He's got offers from Houston, Kansas State, and a number of group of 5 schools. He reminds me of Kiki Abrams in this way, Keelan Abrams from DeSoto. They're very different players. But Abrams, not the highest rated dude in the world, and I don't know what grade Maddox is going to get when it's all said and done, but not the highest rated defensive lineman or edge player in the 2025 class. However, he's producing at a high level in what I would call the District of Doom, the toughest district in Texas high school football. You're playing Duncanville, okay? You're playing Cedar Hill. You're playing Waxahachie, teams that are really good. You're playing them week in and week out. And he was getting to the quarterback on a consistent basis and just blowing up plays and making plays. Maddox, in a similar way, he's playing 6A football against some of the best teams in the state of Texas. He's playing in a very competitive and good district. And he's producing. As a sophomore, he's starting, and he wins the Defensive Lineman of the Year award in that district. And as a junior, he follows it up with 65 tackles. I'm sure he has a big senior year in store for himself. But when you watch him on tape, it's exciting to see the way that he gets off the ball, the way he's able to move around, make plays, and then also just the strength and the intensity at the point of attack. He is winning battles at the snap of the ball. Good leverage, stays low, and is just driving dudes off the ball, which is super encouraging to see. So I like this pickup again. Andy Avalos, man, it's very clear. And I don't think this is a referendum on the current defensive line group. I just feel like it's, hey, from the moment I got here, my number one priority has been I need to find pass rushers. I need to find guys that can hold their ground and make things happen on the interior of this defensive line. Because if this defense is going to work, you have to get pressure on the quarterback. And honestly, as well, you just have to be able to stop the run. They lost the Baylor game this past year because they just could not stop the run. Baylor figured out in the second half, we're just handing the rock to Bryson Washington. We're going to lean on this offensive line. And that's going to be the difference in the ball game. And unfortunately, it was. I mean, TCU could not get a stop in the second half of that game. Now, Marcus Deal was injured. Hakeem Ajibalaiba went down in the first drive of the game. So that made a huge difference. But that depth wasn't there. And they're trying to address that right now. Now, I don't know how many of these guys are going to play right away. But it's once again just looking at the future of, hey, let's go find somebody who, if there's an injury, if there's a need to just get some snaps, right? Keep dudes fresh. On the D-line, you want as much of a rotation as possible because you want to keep those pass rushers in good standing, like cardio-wise, ready to go. But, yeah, Maddox Flint, Westlake player, again, 6'2", 265 pounds, not currently ranked, but I think he'll get one soon now he's committed to TCU. And another guy that was at the Elite Junior Weekend. So the staff did a really good job of closing the deal once they got these guys on campus and saying, hey, we've done the visit. We've done everything we can do. We need to get you here, get you locked in. And that's the case once again. So we'll see where they go next. I mean, Jamarcus McFarland, he might be relaxing a little bit in the spring and summer with all the recruiting he's done over the past week or so. I have a feeling, though, they're going to continue to try to build here because this is just so obviously a place where they think they need more numbers, they need more depth, and they just need more talent, to be frank about it. So excited for this pickup as well. And, yeah, the momentum keeps going on the 2026 class. When we come back, a rough day for men's and women's basketball. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Game time. NFL playoffs going on, conference championship games this weekend. Get the NFL playoff experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, the connection with other fans, it's unmatched. The thrill of seeing your favorite team clinch a playoff win live, it's a memory you'll never forget. This year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new featured Game Time picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE to take $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Well, the TCU men, they fall to Kansas on Wednesday night. Good atmosphere there at Shalimar Arena. I mean, a good way to start it. They jumped out to a 14-point lead. They're up 26-12 with about 10 minutes left in the first half. They end up losing, though, 74-61. I mean, I thought they fought well. Like, even in the second half of that ball game, it was close, but they really had no answer for Hunter Dickinson on the inside. Ernest Uday ended up with 7 points. I don't think it was his best ball game. He had 5 steals as well. He's pretty active on defense, but there were times in the first half, I don't know if he was just lost, if he was upset because he wasn't getting many touches on the offensive end, but it just felt like the effort and energy weren't completely there from him. David Punch, I'm not sure what's going on in the last 2 games. It feels like it's getting harder and harder to play Punch and Uday at the same time, because there's just no floor spacing. Punch is camping out in the perimeter, but when they drive and kick to him, he's not going to shoot a 3. He did hit 1 3 today, but he's not going to pull the trigger on that outside shot. And so then he's trying to put the ball on the deck or find somebody to hand it off to, and it really messes with the rhythm of that offense. After a rough first half offensively, Kansas kind of found their groove and got the job done. I mean, it's not a surprising result. It's frustrating because it felt like a winnable ball game, and TCU just turned the ball over way too much. Vashon Ouellette reminds me a lot of Damian Baugh. I mean, he can shoot you into a game. He can shoot you out of it. He's reckless with the basketball at times. He had just silly turnovers tonight, but he's also, I mean, there's no one else to play. Unless you're going to rip the red shirt off Ashton Simmons, which they've made it pretty clear they don't want to do that. This is your dude, and you just got to live with the growing pains. And hopefully it's something that'll pay off for them next year, because he gets so much experience handling the ball, trying to run the offense, and trying to balance, like, when do I go get my own and when do I try to find other players and spread the ball around. But at the moment, it's tough to watch it, and it's been tough for him to find a way to get in a groove. So, tough loss against KU. They're now 3-4 in conference play. They'll play UCF this weekend, which has been another team that's had a very up and down conference run so far. You just got to keep stacking up as many wins as possible, and I think see kind of where the dust settles towards the end of the season. More disappointing to me, the TCU women go to Oklahoma State, go Stillwater. They're 7-0 in Big 12 play. They had a 15-point lead going into halftime. Sedona Prince already had a double-double. She was just doing everything, making plays happen out there. They lose 60-59. Got outscored 20-11 in the fourth quarter, 16-9 in the third quarter, only 20 points total in the second half. And it's the same story. I've talked about this a couple of times over the last couple of weeks. They'll get out to a big lead, and then they'll just fade. And I don't know what the problem is, but the offense in crunch time has been a disaster at times, which doesn't make any sense because they have good isolation players. I mean, Haley Van Lith was brought in to go win one-on-one matchups like this late in the ball game, and she had a jump shot basically at the buzzer where she could have won it, and she missed. It was a tough jumper, but if she makes it, they win that ball game. Sedona Prince got off to a nice start, but then she was MIA after that. And Oklahoma State made tough shots. They played with great effort. They played with great intensity. The crowd got into it. One thing I did not understand, and I've noticed this from Mark Campbell in his first 2 seasons here as head coach. I noticed it in the Tech game last year. It stood out to me in the NC State game this year. He just wants his team to play through things. Like, he doesn't want to call timeouts. I don't know what that's about. But Oklahoma State just kept whittling down that lead, and you could feel the tension. Like, you could feel every time they would get a big bucket and get a stop that they were sensing that they were about to come back. And I just never understood why he didn't take a timeout and try to regroup and reset. But it's their first loss in conference play. It just stinks because they had such a big lead. I mean, you go on the road to Stillwater, you lose. That's disappointing, but, I mean, you lose on the road sometimes, right? To blow a lead like this, though, it's just a rough deal. Hopefully they bounce back this weekend when they play Baylor. My apologies to Frog fan. I really did mean to talk about baseball in the third segment, but TCU got to commit. I want to talk about the Josh Hoover thing. We got basketball. I will get to baseball on Friday. I promise. This is Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. That's your tease for Friday. In segment 3, though, we'll have other coverage as well. Subscribe to the YouTube channel or on your favorite podcast platform.